Alright, are you ready for another nerdy analysis of RPG concepts applied to real life? Or rather, over-analysis. But you can't have analysis without anal, right? It's part of the fun. This time it's about critical hits. And this video is sponsored by Era of Celestials, a free new MMORPG that's being released right now on mobile. And it's got 3 different classes, tons of items, a number of PvE modes and PvP battles. There's some really nice looking magic effects, celestial transformations, and hilarious voice acting.
Chests contain boundless treasures.
So try it out. The link is down below in the description as well as right here. And by playing the game you actively help Era of Celestials support the channel and keep the camera running, which is pretty helpful as YouTube keeps letting content creators down, as you probably know. Alright, so let's talk about critical hits. And it's a very common trope in role-playing games, of course, and they come in different varieties. Don't get me wrong, I'm deliberately nitpicking here for the sake of making this more educational. Like, there isn't that much wrong with the concept of a critical hit, and for gameplay purposes in particular, absolutely. Would this be plausible in real life, either in historical combat or in some kind of fictional scenario that still obeys the laws of physics and, human anatomy and logic and all that? Well, you can probably guess the answer. It depends, as I always say, because it does. So if you have the kind of critical hit that you see in Fire Emblem, for example, it doesn't take any experience with historical martial arts or anything to realize that it's ridiculous. I mean, it's just this, oh yeah, I'm gonna be flashy and show off and twirl my weapon around or otherwise do this extra spectacular move because it looking cooler does more damage. Common sense, of course. I mean, if you want to inflict more damage, you just gotta look more badass, right? Yeah, so of course this does not apply in real life. Could a character deliberately just go for it full force and do more damage that way by, putting more effort into it? Well, the problem is real combat is not a joke. I mean, it's always 100%. So this is one of the main problems with the concept of critical hit when it's this conscious extra effort that the character puts in. Apparently, if you don't put in 100% effort, if you don't fight as hard and as intensely and as intelligently as you can in real combat, then you probably die. I mean, that's a default. This is not like the extra beast mode or whatever, that's the default. That's what you have to do. And when saying this, I'm referring to lethal combat. There are other situations in which you may not have to go all out, like a judicial or honor duel in which you fight until first blood is drawn and you don't want to cripple or kill the opponent because your opponent's friends and family might take revenge or you might get sued, etc. But of course in a situation like that, you don't want critical hits at all. That's in fact the opposite of what you want. I'd say most of the time light attacks like that are set up for the real fight-ending blow, and the main focus is on incapacitating the opposition as quickly as possible. If I'm attacked, I don't just want to do this. Just a little cut. It'll bother them a little bit. Death by 1,000 cuts. Not what I want to do. What I want to do, if I'm attacked, is this. I want to end it. I want to do the highest amount of damage I can, because realistically, in real combat, the longer I'm engaged with an enemy, the higher the chance of me dying. I want to, just get out of this as quickly as possible, because every action has to be executed with the intent to incapacitate immediately or as soon as absolutely possible, because you cannot afford the risk. So in that sense, every successful attack is a critical hit, or it should be at least. In the manuals, you see a lot of strikes to the head because they are very likely to incapacitate an opponent. Then there's another kind of deliberate critical hit where you attack an enemy from behind. Dark Souls style is, of course, most well known here. So you sneak up on somebody and you just jam that blade in their back and do extra, or whatever, strike them from behind, stuff like that. Now this, in and of itself, would make sense. Like, you have, if you have a defenseless target, like an enemy / victim that isn't even aware of the attack that you're launching on them, yeah, of course, you can potentially do a lot more damage because they aren't ready, they aren't defending themselves. And striking them from behind in the back of the head, that's a very vulnerable part of the skull. That's where all the brain functions are that are responsible for keeping you alive. There's the spine, of course, which is vulnerable, the kidneys, etc., etc. There's a lot of, good juicy stuff, so to speak, in the back. So taking them from behind is extra effective. Anyway, here's the problem with that. How do you get there? It's really, really hard to sneak up on somebody in real life. It's not as simple as just, I'm gonna stick to the shadow, and if they turn around, I'll just stop moving and I'll sit in the shadows and they can't see me then. Well, if it's very dark, maybe you might be able to get away with it, but I mean, if the guard is doing their job, then they probably have some kind of light source. They aren't stupid. And also, it's very difficult to get close enough. As humans, we have fairly decent peripheral vision, not as good as animals that have the eyes on the outside of the head, but it's decent enough. And a quick sight glance over the shoulder shows you quite a bit of what's going on behind you. And if the enemy has some kind of situational awareness, then yeah, they will occasionally look around. The big exception is certain types of helmet that limit vision and hearing quite substantially. There's still the risk of randomly turning around, but it still seems a lot more plausible. Plus, that kind of sneak attack from behind will give you a chance to mostly bypass the armor by jamming a blade into the gaps, and almost every armor has gaps somewhere. If you're right behind somebody, they may feel emotion, or they may hear you, or they may just see you out of the corner of their eye, or they would also randomly move and turn around. It's not like in games where they have this fixed pattern. You can observe the guard. Oh, okay, so they go in that direction, they turn around, then they go in this direction, then they go back to point A, and then they, in this certain fixed interval, they do that thing. Let alone in an actual fight, if the opponent already knows you're there and has already engaged you in combat, you can't. Short version, unless they do something stupid, like twirling and turning their backs on you to do some fancy nonsensical move, you won't be able to hit them in the back. It's just not happening. Unless there are multiple people. Of course, if one person fights 3 people and one tries to get around them, even then it can be difficult, because of course the single fighter is very well aware of their disadvantage and will try what they can to use tactical movement and footwork to not be flanked or not have anybody in their back. But you may be able to pull that off, and in that case, you could argue for critical hit. Yeah, sure, why not? But what about the luck-based kind of critical hit? And the intentional critical hit also ties into what I'm about to say here to an extent. But the kind of critical hit that just happens just because, lucky hit, just randomly in between. Now that is not very plausible. It's not like an unarmed fight. Even that can end pretty quickly sometimes. If they get in a sucker punch, I guess that would be an example of a critical hit. The sucker punches that you sometimes see on the street where somebody throws this wild haymaker that somehow against all odds connects and knocks that person out cold immediately. That is kind of a critical hit. That is a lucky hit. But if you're fighting with weapons, you cannot afford that kind of guesswork. Is luck an important factor here? Well, the lower the fighter's skill is, the more luck matters. The more skilled and experienced they are, the more confident are they in their abilities, and the more likely they are to do exactly what they set out to, unless the opponent successfully defends against that. But if they land the attack, and they're skilled and experienced enough, then it's not really a matter of luck. If you've practiced enough, you hit where you aim, or at least pretty close. If you aim a thrust at the chest, at the center of the chest, or off to one side, and you aim in this general area, you'll hit in this general area. In rapier fencing, we practice thrusts on individual fingers to train accuracy. So if you can hit a finger, then you can hit a hand. If you can hit a hand, you can hit a heart. So it's not really much a matter of luck, unless, as said, you're not very good, your accuracy is pretty low, then yeah, I mean, if you thrust at the torso and instead of hitting the chest you hit the stomach, then yeah, this is not going to be as effective, it's not going to be a critical hit. Anyway, that's about all I've got for right now, so as I said, check out the video description, and I hope you found this enjoyable. Thanks for watching.